Good morning, everyone, and welcome to arguably one of the most important blogs in the Project Rebalance series of blogs. So, without further ado, let's get into it. I've tried to keep my spoilers of this blog to an absolute minimum, but you can see in this image here, I see the Nightmare, and I see Inquisitors. And this makes me really happy. If you are coming from the YouTube algorithm, I play 30 defense, combat only Ultimate Iron Man, but that is besides the point right now. Project Rebalance, item and combat adjustments. Our third Project Rebalance blog focuses on item adjustments and other combat changes. Project Rebalance combat and item changes. Anxiously eyeballing your bank? Wondering what changes Project Rebalance will bring to your favorite bits of gear? Well, wonder no longer, because here's the blog you've been waiting for. Today we're talking buffs, debuffs, and other changes to various bits of combat gear. And just to round things out, we've also got some more combat changes for you. But before we move on, just like the last Project Rebalance blog, this one coincides with an open beta that you can take part in by jumping into any of the beta worlds once they're live today, which should be shortly after this post. That should be available, I imagine, after this video goes up. These worlds feature all of the changes from the NPC defense changes blogs and all the changes from today's blog too, so jump in and take a look. So, at quick glance, we have buffed items here, we have nerfs here, and adjustments here. We see drop rates and Nightmare. Oh, that makes me very excited. Inquisitor's buff, Elder Maul buff. Oh, that's a long time coming. Occult nerf, that is absolutely needed. We'll continue. Here's a handy summary of everything we're touching on here. Note that some things in the adjusted category are effectively buffs and might be subject to opinion in some instances. Yes, before I continue, all of this is subject to your feedback. So reach out via the various social media channels if you have any feedback for Jagex. Item adjustments. Before we get started, please note that the tomes of fire and water will be adjusted as per our previous Project Rebalance blog, so we won't be rehashing those changes here. First, we'll look at perhaps the most anticipated or dreaded set of changes, focused primarily on magic gear progression. Magic gear in the Occult necklace. The Occult necklace does an astronomical amount of lifting for magic's damage output, and to make a long story short, we think an item this powerful should set you back more than a mere 800,000 gold. For example, let's assume two players both have 99 magic and fancy a bit of barrows. Player A equips an Occult necklace for 800k and calls it a day. Player B equips the Ancestral set, a Magus ring, max mage essentially, and turns on Augury, which sets them back a whopping 454 million GP. Now, who do you think kills the melee Barrows brothers fastest? If you answered player A, you're correct. We hope you understand why the situation seems more than a little unfair. It's time to break the Occult necklace's stranglehold on magic's gear progression. There are already too many Occult necklaces out there for us to reasonably make them less common. Making them harder to get will just punish iron players who have to climb all the way to 93 Slayer for this all-important unlock. I don't particularly agree with this. I would hope that they would at least bump the drop rate from normal Smoke Devils higher and make it, I guess, more common at the boss. But hey, that's just me. In addition, the Occult necklace is so powerful that other gear upgrades become less exciting by comparison. We plan to kill two birds with one stone by redistributing the Occult necklace's stats around other gear. Occult necklace, magic damage reduced from 10% to 4%? Okay, I thought it was going to be to 5%. Magic damage per piece increased from 2% to 4%. That's good. Honestly, that's good. The lion's share of this redistribution should be in that top tier of magic upgrade. So I'm really happy that is Wait, Infinity Robes? Yo? Okay. Oh my god. My magic setup is changing for Nightmare. Oh, yes, focus on the blog, Sam. Focus on the blog. All right, Ancestral Robes, 2 to 4%. Virtus Robes, 1% to 2%. Infinity Robes, 0 to 1%. Dagon High Robes, 0 to 1%. This also applies to ornamented versions. Third Age Mage armor piece is cool. Augury, that is very good. I think that is very good. Now Augury has more of a use, an actual use this time. The Shadow's damage doesn't multiply accuracy or damage bonuses gained from prayers, so this would remain a 4% increase rather than a 12%. How does that shake out damage-wise? You can pause and read that if you want. I'm not going to read through all that. These changes bring the necklace's power a little more in line with its obtainability so that players can feel themselves getting stronger as they unlock other gear. Additionally, Augury now has greater offensive power, increasing the value of the Arcane Prayer Scroll. We also see new utility for robe sets, which are currently best suited for accounts with defense limitations. We like that. We want to see Aram's robes sit in a unique, tankier battle mage niche with defense that outshines other options in exchange for slightly less offensive potential. In some scenarios, you don't even gain max hits from equipping more offensive sets, so these higher defenses are effectively free. For players with near best in slot setups, these changes buff magic and bring other weapons closer to the shadow. Now, this approach still has its issues. Magic has traditionally struggled to keep up with other corners of the combat triangle in PvP, and these changes make it even weaker, especially for one defense counts. We think we could resolve these issues with a blighted necklace slot and a little more damage on the Elder Chaos Druid robes, but we'd like to hear your feedback first. I think when you lock yourself to defense, you are locking yourself out of offensive upgrades. Look at the defenders, for example. Blighted necklace slot, would that be like a new slot? I don't necessarily think that'd be a good thing. In my opinion, the only situation where this would be acceptable is if one defense accounts are nerfed heavily by this. But hey, change happens, right? Speaking of, we'd also like to hear about other bits of gear that deserve a little boost. We can even work in increments of 0.5% if this helps. We're committed to bringing the Occult necklace down a notch, but remember that it will still remain the best in slot necklace offering for any magic setup and will likely remain affordable. I mean, 4% magic damage bonus on the necklace is still good. That will still be usable, that will still be used. The Soulreaper Axe, moving swiftly on to this hard-hitting slash weapon capable of dishing out some serious damage if you're willing to go through the frustrating process of bringing out its true potential. We don't plan to increase the Soul Reaper's damage directly. Here's what we will be doing instead. Stacks will no longer be lost instantly upon switching a weapon. Stacks will start decreasing after 20 ticks or 12 seconds without attacking, up from 10 ticks or 6 seconds. When stacks naturally degrade, they'll heal you for the damage you took while building up those stacks. Effectively, we're making stacks easier to maintain and removing the overly punishing stack drain when switching weapons. This does indirectly buff the Soul Reaper's damage output, but it also means you'll no longer run out of stacks while waiting during intermission phases in some boss fights, such as Verzik's transition phases between P2 and P3. We've seen more suggestions regarding the Soulreaper Axe, but right now our focus is on improving its usability and ensuring it doesn't lose power every time you switch gear. The Elder Maul. This thunderous crush weapon is a mega rare from the Chambers of Xeric, but its PvM use cases are far and few between. Barring a brief moment in the sun when you discovered the 1-0 method for taking down the Great Olm's melee hand, it's hard to bring a slow, hard-hitting weapon in line with other main hand options because our combat system rewards speed. 5-tick weapons like the Scythe and the Twisted Bow do a fantastic job, but an even slower 6-tick weapon requires a max hit that would level half of Varrock. Oh my god. You're truly shaking the world with this one. What makes the Elder Maul great is that feeling of bringing this behemoth weapon down on an opponent and softening them up for future blows while they're still reeling from the impact. Initially, we thought about shaving off a little defense for each swing, but struggled to get it to a place where it wasn't either totally broken or outperformed by the Dragon Warhammer. Instead, we're giving it a special attack worth 50% of special attack energy, which reduces your target's defense by 35%. This makes it a better defense reduction option than the Dragon Warhammer, and also frees up an inventory slot for scenarios where you'd otherwise use two-handed weapons. For example, if you'd only be using the Scythe and a Dragon Warhammer in the raid, you'll be able to skip out on an Avernic and bring something else in that slot. Okay, so they're essentially just allowing you to eliminate the Avernic. You're getting that extra inventory slot to do something with. Given the prevalence of defense reduction in many endgame encounters, we feel like this should give you more reason to bring the Elder Maul out of the bank every once in a while. Do let us know if you could use a little something more. So they're just adding a special attack to the Elder Maul. I sort of felt like it would get more. I definitely want to know what you feel in the comments below, because I felt like something they were initially saying. Initially, we thought about shaving off a little defense for each swing. I felt like this up to a cap would be better, because if you look at the Scythe and the Twisted Bow, they both have these little effects that happen, right? It's an interesting thought. Here we are, the big one. Inquisitor's Armor and the Inquisitor's Mace. The Inquisitor's armor set and mace are crush-focused set, dropped by the Nightmare and Phosani's Nightmare. Each piece of the armor set boosts your damage and accuracy by 0.5% when equipped, with an additional 1% for the full set, totaling a 2.5% increase in both damage and accuracy. You generally see people using this set with the Scythe against enemies weak to crush, trading off a defense for a hefty damage output. But where's the mace? Well, the mace is a strong weapon. It's staggeringly expensive at more than 275 million Gielinor pieces, and its damage output simply doesn't make up for the cost. You'll hear later about how we plan to adjust the Nightmare's drop rates to make her uniques more obtainable. What? But for now, here's how we're giving the mace some extra juice. While using the Inquisitor's mace, damage and accuracy bonuses from the Inquisitor's armor, including the set effects bonuses, are tripled. In a full set with the mace, the bonuses increase from 2.5% to 7.5% total damage and accuracy. Ooh, that's not exactly what I wanted to hear. This change should make the mace feel like a worthwhile stepping stone between the Abyssal Bludgeon and the Scythe, adding more utility to a rarely seen set. If their goal is to just buff the mace, I guess this is fine, but I was sort of expecting them to look at the armor as well. This isn't necessarily an armor buff, this is a mace buff. I don't know how I feel about that necessarily, so I'm just gonna move on. A little disappointed, to be honest. Voidwaker. When we first said this crazily consistent special attack weapon was on the table for Project Rebalance, we said we wanted to tweak it because completely bypassing accuracy checks in combat could become a limiter for future spec DPS weapons. So although we're still presenting our proposed changes today, we're aware that this is something many of you have spoken out against and will continue to bear your feedback in mind. The proposal looks like this. Adjust the special attack so that it no longer ignores accuracy, but instead rolls with a 200% increased accuracy against your target's slash or magic defense, depending on which is lower. I am not a professional with the Voidwaker, so that is up to you to comment down below what you think of this. This means that the special attack still rolls with triple accuracy and picks the lowest of the two values so that you always have the best odds of hitting. Fits nicely between the Voidwaker's melee but magic identity. It also keeps an incredibly consistent choice in both PvM and PvP scenarios, without being so consistent that it bypasses one of our main balancing levers. Ancient Godsword. This Zerosian spin on the classic melee weapon is designed from the ground up for PvP. Although it does see use in PvM, especially against slash-weak monsters, where long trips are preferred, it's all about outlasting your opponent while still packing a punch. Its special attack, Blood Sacrifice, increases your max hit by 10% upon a successful hit, marks your target. If they don't move at least 5 tiles away after 8 ticks, 4.8 seconds, they'll take 25 magic damage, and you'll heal for the same amount of HP. If your PvP opponent is frozen and you hit them for even a measly 1 damage, you'll ultimately wind up with a 50 HP differential. The damage isn't mitigated by Protect from Magic or Melee, so there's actually very little your opponent can do about that. Is that fun? I don't know, I'm not a PvPer, so PvPers will have to let me know that. To even the odds, we want to reduce the healing provided in PvP without reducing the Godsword's already limited utility. Healing from successful Blood Sacrifice now heals for 15% of the target's maximum HP up to a 25 HP cap. This still leads to a 40 HP differential in PvP, but stops fights from stretching out without counterplay, even when your opponent is playing perfectly. The Ancient Godsword is basically unchanged in PvM, except in the rare case of fighting lower HP targets, and it really isn't designed for such encounters anyways. In my opinion, that's fine. Again, we'd really like to hear your feedback about this change. We're not committed to it, and if the Ancient Godsword's role in today's meta has changed, we're more than willing to leave it alone. Alright, other combat adjacent changes. The rest of the changes focus on other aspects of PvM combat, such as drop rates. Very cool. The Dragon Warhammer. Dragon Warhammer mentioned, all irons to battle stations. This quintessential grind item is a staple for those taking their first foray into PvM. Unfortunately, it's not that common. Lizardmen Shamans aren't hard to kill, so the whole hours-long adventure can be quite boring, which is why we're making the following change. Boost the Dragon Warhammer's drop rate from 1 in 5,000 to 1 in 3,000. Wow. That's a buff, alright. This is effectively an 80% increased drop rate, since a 100% increased drop rate would be 1 in 2.5k, half of the original value, which we feel is better suited to a mid-game upgrade required to chase more challenging uniques. Now, we don't often adjust drop rates, and we don't plan to make it a habit, but for the Warhammer and a few other persistent offenders, we're making an exception. Speaking of which, Now, I do want to mention before we move on to the big one, if they're adding that special attack to the Elder Maul, and it does more defense drain than the Dragon Warhammer, I think this is great. Because the Elder Maul being a mega rare from an endgame raid, it should be better than the Dragon Warhammer, should they go the path of adding defense drain. Oh my god, I just saw a line. Okay, we'll get to that. Nightmare and Phosanis. These bosses are tough, and their uniques do the heavy lifting in terms of rewards. However, these uniques are so rare that players don't feel either variant of this beastly boss is worth their time or their supplies. To add to this issue, the Nightmare's uniques are mostly niche or underpowered, which doesn't exactly justify their rarity. We've already spoken about making changes to the Inquisitor's mace, and we feel adjusting the drop rates for uniques will provide the other half of the equation. We're sort of hoping they do a little more with the Inquisitor's armor, considering how the 2.5% doesn't really do anything for normal crush weapons, but, you know, crush armor set, I guess they want to capitalize on the Inquisitor's mace for that set. Here are the specifics. This is something I'm not going to skip over. For the normal Nightmare, Inquisitor pieces and the Nightmare Staff loot table has a 1 in 90 chance to roll, improved from 1 in 120. The Orb loot table has a 1 in 450 chance to roll, improved from 1 in 600. Phosani's Nightmare, Inquisitor's pieces plus Nightmare Staff loot table has a 1 in 150 chance to roll, improved from 1 in 200. Phosani's Nightmare Orb loot table has a 1 in 720 chance to roll, improved from 1 in 960. In short, all Nightmare uniques are being made 50% more common. Damn. Wow. Alright, that definitely saves some time. No, this is great, and I will continue to grind for the mace once this drops. We're conscious that this change may affect the GE value of these items, although some may actually receive a boost due to other Project Rebalance changes. We feel that these changes are important enough to go ahead regardless. However, if you've got thoughts about either of the drop rate changes we've spoken about today, we'd love to hear them. I think these are good. I think 1 in 3,000 for the Dragon Warhammer is fair for the position it's in the meta. And truth be told, as much as I love this drop rate increase, it's great. I wish they would have done a little more with the Inquisitor's armor. Careful, my bias is showing. Minimum hit adjustments. For those of you not in the know, Old School's combat works a bit like Dungeons and Dragons. You roll once to hit, and then roll again to see how much damage you do. In the current system, it's possible to hit, and then roll 0 damage. This is especially punishing in the early game where players have a lower max hit overall. If a low-level player can only hit 1 damage, there's a 50-50 chance that they'll deal 0 damage instead. Even in the late game, when players are significantly more powerful, the potential to roll 0 is always looming, and anyone who's ever whiffed a Dragon Warhammer special attack knows exactly how frustrating this can be. Yes, absolutely. Previously, we proposed that any successful hit should guarantee at least 1 damage, but we still feel there are further changes required. The thing is, increasing either the minimum or maximum hit by X will increase the average hit by X over 2. We're actually increasing the damage output of every single weapon in the game, and this change would be disproportionately impactful for multi-hit weapons like the Scythe. As a result, our changes are focused on improving the feel of early combat and improving the readability of combat in late game scenarios. On a hit, damage rolls between 1 and the current max hit minus 1. For example, if your max hit is 58, your damage rolls between 1 and 57. This leaves DPS unchanged aside from the extremely early stages of the game, which should feel much better. Yeah, I like that. I think that's fair. We're also conscious that some account builds may be disproportionately impacted by this change. In response, we're looking to introduce items especially for these players, which will let them continue on as they always have. You'll love to hear that. And I think this is completely good and fair. Early game combat prayers. In other early game news, we'll be making changes to Thick Skin, Burst of Strength, Clarity Thought, Sharp Eye, and Mystic Will. They may look like the names you came up with for the band you always wanted to start in high school, but they're actually the first tier prayer unlocks. We'll forgive you for being unfamiliar with them because currently they're not strong enough to feel worth using, and much like your high school band, they don't stay active for very long. Here are our plans. Reduce the drain rate of Thick Skin, Burst of Strength, Clarity Thought, Sharp Eye, and Mystic Will from 5 points per minute to 1 point per minute. Adjust Sharp Eye and Burst of Strength to boost your range and strength levels by 1 respectively if they're lower than 20. The drain rate change should be self-explanatory. At the levels players will realistically use these prayers, they don't have enough prayer points to get good use out of them, and this change will fix that. Yeah, absolutely. The second change ensures that these damage boosting prayers will actually boost some damage in some instances. For context, old school systems almost always round down, so for a 5% strength increase to actually work, you need a strength level of at least 20. By that point in the game, players are often past the point where they turn to these basic prayers for a boost. Adding just one flat level, 4 levels, below 20 gives these prayers utility at their recommended level and serves to demonstrate how useful prayers will be later on, since it might be the difference that gives you an added max hit early on. Cool. Autocast Delay. We already spoke about this change when you asked us about it following the NPC defense changes blog, so it shouldn't catch anyone off guard. Essentially, when selecting the Autocast option for a staff and then clicking on an NPC, there's a 1-tick delay. Yes, it feels clunky, and it also reduces your damage in scenarios where you're reducing and restoring your magic level or switching into a magic setup. Now that we're introducing elemental weaknesses, we want spell-based magic to feel nice and smooth, so we're removing the delay. Very good, very good. Theater of Blood and Versic Phase 2, Soul Theater Blood enjoyers have expressed frustration at the disparity between how Versic's mechanics are handled in normal and hard mode. We're fixing that. If only one player is left alive during Versic's second phase, only one Nihilicus Matamenos, also known as the Red Crab, despite clearly being ticks, will spawn. This change isn't just for solo players. Should your team meet an untimely end during Phase 1, you should now be able to clutch it out. Tomb of Amasket. Path of Atmakin and Baba. There's no escaping the dreaded monkey room. Well, there is if you don't have the raid unlocked. Thankfully, your prayers to the Menophyte Pantheon have been answered. Increase hit points for all style-based enemies inside the Path of Atmakin. These enemies will now always take maximum damage when attacked with the opposing combat style. Very cool, very cool. Assuming you're in a solo raid, this is how the HP values and max hits will shake out. I won't read it out, you guys can pause and read. Note that there are stronger and weaker variants of all these NPCs indicated by 2 HP values in the list above. And the HP totals will scale with group size and raid level. Makes sense? At the end of the Path of Atmakin awaits Baba and her extremely potent melee attack. Since we're here, we may as well take a swing at it. Baba now only hits for 25% of damage through Protect from Melee, down from 33%. This reduces the damage by around 24%. This is good and all, but I still think people will Red X. This should prevent players losing so much DPS to Red X, although those looking to save supplies will find it isn't removed entirely. And that's that. As always, we're excited to hear your thoughts and feedback regarding everything we discussed today. We're making these changes to relieve the most common frustrations you've told us about, and we believe they'll massively improve progression and safeguard Old School's future. A huge thank you again to everyone who's provided feedback, and no doubt we'll be back to discuss it soon. I look forward to the blog update on this blog. The main things that impact me, naturally, you should comment down below what you think of all of this. For me, it is the Nightmare and Phosani's Nightmare drop rates being buffed, which are incredible. However, I'd still like to see them return to the normal Nightmare and do a quality of life pass. There was a question years ago now that was said to be repolled. In my opinion, it failed because it was essentially a 2-in-1 question of do you want randomized phases and do you want the protection prayers to completely negate the damage? I really do think the no damage through prayers question would have passed while the randomized question would have failed. I think it'd be great in normal Nightmare for the Husks to have like a minimum hit, scaling with team size perhaps. Or you could go the simple route and always make it so that crush weapons one-shot them. And it's sort of the same thing with parasites in normal Nightmare too. Make them one-shottable. But then again, that's probably outside of the scope of this blog, so you can ignore my ramblings. And in regards to the Inquisitor armor and the Inquisitor's mace, this is technically an Inquisitor's mace buff, not an Inquisitor's armor buff, because you need to use the Inquisitor's mace. And if that's their intention to simply buff the mace itself, then this is fine. However, if they want to buff the armor, then the same effect should simply apply to all one-handed crush type weapons. And of course, take this at face value. I haven't actually looked at every single one-handed crush weapon to know if this would be good or not. I don't know, this just sort of feels underwhelming without doing the DPS calcs. I don't know, let me know what you think down below. I think the Elder Maul needs a little something extra. Just giving it a special attack sort of feels lackluster, especially when compared to the Twisted Bow, Scythe, Shadow. But hey, my throat is dead now. I'm gonna go drink some water. A thank you to the channel members who support this channel, and I will catch you all in the next video. Wait, that's not my outro.